What if I told you disco didn't just explode out of Studio 54 one night? It grew, slowly, track by track. Songs that came out years before Saturday Night Fever set the floor on fire. Today, we're rewinding the clock, back to the early 70s. 15 tracks that lit the fuse, the songs that gave birth to disco. So let's dive in. And before we do, tell us in the comments, do you remember what you were doing when disco first arrived? Or maybe, which of these songs still makes you want to dance? Number 1, Soul Makossa by Manu Dibango, 1972. Sometimes disco's story starts in the most unexpected place. Cameroon! That's where jazz-funk saxophonist Manu Dibango cooked up Soul Makossa. At first, it was just a B-side, hidden behind a sports anthem he wrote for a soccer tournament. But DJs in New York discovered it, slipped it into their sets, and something clicked. That hypnotic mamako, mamasa, mama kosa chant, the steady groove. It sounded like nothing else on the dance floor. It never stormed the charts like later disco hits, but it quietly rewired the culture. David Mancuso spun it at his loft parties. Club DJs looped it endlessly. Even Michael Jackson would echo that chant years later on, "Wanna be startin' something." Soul Makossa wasn't just a song. It was the seed, the spark, the sound that whispered disco was coming. Number 2, Love Train by the OJs, 1972. Before mirror balls and light-up floors, there was Philadelphia. And out of that city came a wave of soul so lush, so polished, it practically invented disco's blueprint. At the front of that wave, the OJs. Love Train wasn't just a song, it was an anthem. Strings that shimmered, bass that pulsed, and a beat steady enough to make anyone move. Recorded at Sigma Sound Studios with producers Gamble and Huff, it carried the unmistakable Philly sound. Smooth, orchestral, but with a groove that demanded the dance floor. Don't you know that it's time to get on board? Released in early 73, Love Train shot straight to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. But beyond the charts, it carried a message. A call for unity, for people everywhere to join hands at a time when the world felt divided. That mix, social hope wrapped in pure rhythm, was something disco would carry forward. For many, this was the first time they heard that irresistible combination of soul and dance. Love Train didn't just preach togetherness, it made people feel it, one step at a time. Number 3, Rock the Boat by the Hughes Corporation, 1974. Some call it the first true disco hit to crash into the mainstream, a breezy little tune from a trio who almost didn't get a shot. The Hughes Corporation were signed to RCA Records, and at first, Rock the Boat wasn't even seen as single material. The label thought it was filler, but DJs started spinning it in New York clubs, and the dance floor spoke louder than any executive. The track was recorded in Hollywood with producer John Flores. Light percussion, soaring harmonies, and that bouncing rhythm. It wasn't heavy funk, and it wasn't Motown soul. It was something new, something designed to keep bodies moving. By the summer of 1974, Rock the Boat sailed all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. A first for disco, proof that this sound could top the charts, not just fill the clubs. Don't rock the boat, baby. Rock the boat. Don't tip the boat over. Rock the boat. The group never repeated the success, but that didn't matter. Rock the Boat cracked the door wide open. Suddenly, disco wasn't underground anymore. It was on the radio, and the tide was rising. Number 4, Do It Till You're Satisfied by BT Express, 1974. Brooklyn had something to say in the early disco years, and BT Express delivered it with one simple message: keep doing it until you're satisfied. This was no polished Philly soul. This was raw, funky, and hypnotic. Recorded at Ultrasonic Studios in Hempstead, New York, the track leaned heavy on bass lines, percussion, and that chant-like hook that stretched on like a mantra. It wasn't about verses and choruses. It was about the groove. The song hit in late '74, climbing to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and topping the R&B chart. In clubs, it was unstoppable. DJs loved it because it was long, repetitive, and perfect for mixing, qualities that would become disco's backbone.
People know just what they like to do.
BT Express kept scoring hits for a while, but this one captured the essence of early disco. Rhythm above all. Music built for movement, not radio formulas. Do It Till You're Satisfied was less a song and more a command, and dancers obeyed. Number 5. Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas, 1974. Not every disco classic came from polished orchestras or studio masterminds. Sometimes it came from a quick throwaway track, recorded in just 2 hours.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Carl Douglas was a Jamaican-born singer working in London when he cut Kung Fu Fighting. It was meant to be the B-side to another single, but producer Biddu had an idea. Why not lean into the martial arts craze sweeping the world? Add a disco beat, a little camp, and suddenly, lightning struck.
Those kids were fast as lightning.
Released in 1974, the song went global almost overnight. Number 1 in the US, the UK, and a dozen other countries. Over 11 million copies sold. Its mix of novelty lyrics, funky groove, and soaring falsetto made it irresistible, even if critics rolled their eyes.
But they fought with expert timing.
Kung Fu Fighting proved something important. Disco wasn't just sophisticated. It could be fun, playful, borderline silly, and the world loved it anyway. Number 6. Rock Your Baby by George McCrae, 1974. Some songs don't just start a trend, they light the fuse for an entire genre. In the summer of 1974, that song was Rock Your Baby. Written and produced by Harry Wayne Casey and Richard Finch, the future masterminds of KC and the Sunshine Band. The track was built around a simple drum machine pattern and a shimmering electric piano riff. George McCrae, a Florida singer with a silky falsetto, was asked to lay down the vocals. The result? Pure magic. Rock Your Baby hit number 1 in 55 countries, selling over 11 million copies worldwide. Critics later called it the first true international disco hit. Even John Lennon admitted it inspired him when writing Whatever Gets You Through the Night. The song's minimal groove and airy feel became a template. You didn't need a wall of instruments, just rhythm, voice, and vibe. With Rock Your Baby, disco wasn't just in the clubs anymore. It was global, and it was unstoppable. Number 7. Shame, Shame, Shame by Shirley & Company, 1975. By 1975, disco was beginning to spill out of New York and Philadelphia and onto radios everywhere. And Shirley & Company gave the world a track that made it impossible to sit still.
Get out of my way, I'm gonna have my say.
Led by Shirley Goodman, who'd already had a career back in the 50s with Shirley and Lee, this was her big return. At nearly 40 years old, she wasn't the fresh-faced newcomer, but her voice carried grit, playfulness, and experience. Perfect for disco's mix of glamour and soul. The song was recorded in New Jersey with producer Sylvia Robinson, the same woman who would later spark hip-hop with Sugar Hill Records. Shame, Shame, Shame was built on a driving bass line, hand claps, and a refrain so catchy it practically demanded you get up and dance. It climbed into the top 20 in the US and became a massive hit in Europe, topping charts in Germany and the Netherlands. Suddenly, disco wasn't just an American scene, it was a worldwide language. For Shirley Goodman, it was a one-time comeback. But for disco, Shame, Shame, Shame was proof the groove had gone global. Number 8, The Hustle by Van McCoy and the Soul City Symphony, 1975. Disco wasn't just about the music, it was about the moves, and no track captured that connection better than The Hustle. Van McCoy was already a respected songwriter and producer, penning hits for everyone from Gladys Knight to the Stylistics. But in 1975, a trip to New York changed everything. He visited a club, saw dancers doing a new routine called The Hustle, and decided to turn it into a song. He rushed into New York's Media Sound Studios with the Soul City Symphony, session players who gave the track its sweeping strings and crisp percussion, and a flute melody that seemed to glide across the dance floor, and a classic was born. Released that summer, The Hustle shot to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and won Van McCoy a Grammy. More importantly, it tied disco to an actual dance craze. People weren't just listening, they were learning the steps, moving together, turning disco into a full cultural phenomenon. Sadly, Van McCoy passed away just a few years later, but with this one track, he gave disco its most iconic dance floor anthem. Number 9, Lady Marmalade by Les Belle, 1975. Some disco songs weren't just about the groove, they were about attitude. And in 1975, nobody served more attitude than Les Belle with Lady Marmalade. Produced in New Orleans by the legendary Allen Toussaint, the track blended funk, soul, and that brand new disco pulse. The trio, Patti LaBelle, Nona Hendrix, and Sarah Dash, had just reinvented themselves, trading their old gowns for space-age costumes and a fierce, futuristic style. Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? A line that shocked radio programmers but thrilled listeners. It was bold, sensual, and unforgettable. Backed by funky guitar licks, swirling strings, and Patti's powerhouse vocals, it became more than a song, it was a statement. Lady Marmalade topped the Billboard Hot 100 and turned Les Belle into trailblazers. It pushed disco into glamorous, provocative territory, where fashion and performance mattered just as much as the beat.
Hello, hey Joe, you wanna give it a go?
For Patti LaBelle, it was the moment her voice became legendary. For disco, it showed just how daring and theatrical the genre could be. Number 10, Doctor's Orders by Carol Douglas, 1974. Not every early disco record came from seasoned stars. Sometimes it was a fresh voice that caught the clubs first, like Carol Douglas.
Hi, honey, it's me.
In 1974, she recorded Doctor's Orders, an American remake of a British pop song. Producer Mecco Monardo, yes, the same Mecco who later made the disco's Star Wars theme, gave it a makeover. Out went the pop polish. In came strings, a pulsing bass line, and that unmistakable disco beat. It quickly became one of the very first disco hits fronted by a female solo artist in the U.S. Radio programmers were hesitant at first, but the clubs told a different story. Dancers couldn't get enough of it, and soon the single climbed into the top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100.
I went to see the doctor today.
What made it work? Carol's smooth, confident vocals, playful enough to match the cheeky title, but soulful enough to carry real weight. Doctor's Orders might not be remembered like the later blockbusters, but it marked a turning point. Disco had arrived in America's mainstream, and women were leading the charge. Number 11, Fly Robin, Fly by Silver Convention, 1975. Sometimes, disco said more with less, and no song proved that better than Fly Robin, Fly. Silver Convention were a studio project from Munich, Germany, led by producers Sylvester Levay and Michael Kunze. They weren't aiming for poetry. The song only had 6 words total, but what it lacked in lyrics, it made up for in rhythm. Sweeping strings, thumping bass, and a relentless groove turned Fly, Robin, Fly into a hypnotic club anthem. The repetition wasn't laziness, it was strategy. DJs loved it because it kept dancers locked in the zone. In late 1975, the track soared all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It also won a Grammy for Best R&B Instrumental Performance, showing just how far disco's sound was spreading. With Fly Robin Fly, Silver Convention proved that disco didn't need big lyrics or flashy personalities. Sometimes all you needed was the beat, and it was unstoppable. Number 12, That's the Way, I Like It, by Casey and the Sunshine Band, 1975. By the mid-70s, disco had its sound, but it needed a band bold enough to make it fun, funky, and just a little bit cheeky. Enter KC and the Sunshine Band. Led by Harry Wayne Casey, KC himself, this Miami group fused funk horns, Latin percussion, and a disco backbeat into something instantly infectious. That's the Way, I Like It was their signature moment. Recorded at TK Studios, it had swagger, call and response vocals, and a hook so simple you couldn't forget it. Released in 1975, the single shot to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 twice. First in November, then again in December. Few songs in history have managed that, and on the dance floor, it was unstoppable. DJs could drop it anywhere, anytime, and the crowd would roar back. With this track, KC and the Sunshine Band didn't just join the disco movement, they defined it. Party-ready, irresistible, and built for the floor. That's the way the world liked it. Number 13, Love Hangover by Diana Ross, 1976. When Motown's reigning queen stepped into disco, she didn't tiptoe. She reinvented herself, and Love Hangover was the proof. Recorded in Los Angeles with producer Hal Davis, the track begins as a ballad, slow, sensual, almost hypnotic. But then, halfway through, the beat kicks in. Suddenly, Diana isn't crooning anymore. She's soaring over strings, hand claps, and a relentless disco groove.
If there's a cure for this, I don't want it.
Released in 1976, it became Diana Ross's 4th number 1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. More than that, it showed that Motown wasn't stuck in the past. It was evolving, stepping boldly into the disco era. The song also became a DJ favorite, thanks to its split personality. That slow intro gave dancers a breather, and then, boom, the floor came alive when the tempo shifted.
Think about it all the time. Thinking only makes me smile.
With Love Hangover, Diana Ross proved she wasn't just surviving the 70s, she was leading them. And in doing so, she helped disco gain even more credibility. Number 14, Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel by Tavares, 1976. Some disco tracks didn't just make you dance, they made you swoon. And in 1976, Tavares gave us one of the smoothest with Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel. The Tavares brothers, 5 siblings from Massachusetts with Cape Verdean roots, had already built a reputation for their silky harmonies. But when they teamed up with producer Freddie Perrin, fresh off his work with the Jackson 5, the result was pure disco gold. The song was lushly arranged with strings, brass, and a groove that glided as much as it pulsed. Add the brothers' falsetto harmonies, and you had a track that felt like romance itself set to music. It climbed into the top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hit number 1 on the dance chart. Overseas, it was just as beloved, especially in the UK, where disco was finding its second home. Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel showed that disco wasn't only about high energy. It could be tender, elegant, and still fill a dance floor. Number 15, Disco Inferno by The Tramps, 1976. If one song could capture the very spirit of disco, it's this one. Hot, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Disco Inferno. The Tramps were already known in Philadelphia for their soulful harmonies. But when producer Norman Harris put them in Sigma Sound Studios with that signature Philly orchestration, sweeping strings, blasting horns, and a driving beat, they created a monster. Originally released in 1976, the song had club success. But its true explosion came a year later, when it was featured on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. Suddenly, Burn, Baby, Burn was echoing in discos across the globe. The track roared up the charts, peaking at number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100. More importantly, it became immortal, the anthem that defined the disco era at its peak. Disco Inferno wasn't just a hit. It was the sound of an era setting the world on fire and burning forever in dance history. And there you have it, 15 songs that gave birth to disco. From underground grooves to global anthems, these tracks lit the spark that changed music forever. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these classics still makes you want to hit the dance floor? Or maybe you remember the first time you heard disco take over the radio. Drop your memories in the comments. We're reading them all, because disco may have burned bright in the 70s, but the groove never really died.